"Please don't leave me again." The words echoed through the barren fields as if the wind itself was carrying the plea of a man who had lost everything yet still clung to the fragile hope of love and life returning to him. The story begins with a widowed farmer named Rahim, whose wrinkled hands bore the marks of endless toil under the scorching sun, and whose heart carried a grief heavier than the soil he turned each morning. Once, his small piece of land had been alive with the laughter of his wife Amina, whose presence turned every hardship into joy, whose smile was the sunlight that guided him, whose voice was the lullaby that soothed his restless nights. But years ago, fate had stolen her away, leaving Rahim with nothing but silence that screamed louder than thunder and nights colder than the harshest winter. Every furrow he plowed reminded him of her absence, every season that passed without her presence was a wound reopened, and every sunrise only meant another day of surviving rather than living. Yet destiny, strange and mysterious, always has a way of weaving stories where brokenness can be mended and where grief can find unexpected light. The village knew Rahim as the man who never remarried, the man who spoke more to the land than to people, the man whose eyes looked far away even when he stood before them. His neighbors respected his endurance, but in whispered tones, they pitied his loneliness. What they didn't know was that Rahim's heart still spoke to Amina in every prayer, every whispered, "Don't leave me again," as he stared at the sky at night. One evening, after a long day of tending to the crops, he wandered toward the old willow tree by the riverbank where he and Amina once carved their initials. The bark had grown thick, the carving barely visible, but to Rahim it was a sacred place, a reminder that love once blossomed here. He sat by the roots and felt the earth's pulse, tears streaming down as he remembered the night she promised never to leave him. "Even if I leave this world, I will never leave your heart," she had said, and somehow that promise still lived in him, urging him to keep going. But grief is a heavy chain, and Rahim often wondered how long he could drag it before collapsing under its weight. Then, on a morning when the mist clung to the fields like a veil, Rahim found something unexpected near his farm, a small bundle wrapped in tattered cloth, shivering, crying softly. A child. His heart stopped as he bent down, carefully unfolding the cloth to reveal a baby no older than a few months, abandoned but breathing, fragile yet fighting. Rahim's calloused fingers trembled as he lifted the infant, pressing the tiny body against his chest. The baby's cries echoed through the silence of his home when he carried it inside, filling the emptiness with a sound so pure it pierced through years of sorrow. He did not know who left the child or why fate had placed it at his doorstep, but as the baby's small hand wrapped around his finger, something deep inside him stirred. For the first time since Amina's passing, Rahim felt warmth blooming in the ashes of his broken heart. Days turned into weeks, and Rahim cared for the baby as if destiny had delivered him a second chance at life. He named the child Samir, meaning companion of night, because he filled Rahim's long, lonely nights with laughter and cries that reminded him of life's precious rhythm. Samir's presence transformed the old farmhouse into a place of love again, where once silence reigned. Now there was giggling, the sound of small feet crawling, and the joy of watching someone grow. The villagers were shocked, curious, even suspicious of where the child came from, but Rahim's protective gaze silenced their questions. To him, Samir was not just a foundling, he was a gift from God, perhaps even an answer to his whispered pleas by the willow tree. Yet, beneath the joy, a fear lingered. What if Samir's real family returned? What if destiny would rip this newfound light away, just as it had with Amina? The thought haunted Rahim every night, making his whispered prayers grow more desperate. "Please don't leave me again. Not again." The seasons changed, and with them Rahim's life blossomed in ways he had thought were lost forever. Samir grew quickly, his laughter ringing across the fields like music, and the villagers who once questioned his origins now softened their hearts as they saw the bond between the widowed farmer and the boy. It was as if the land itself responded to Samir's presence, crops sprouting greener, the air filled with more hope, and Rahim's weary eyes carrying a light that had been absent since Amina's passing. The boy followed Rahim everywhere, his small hands clutching at the edges of his father's worn clothes, his curious eyes absorbing every detail of the world around him. In Samir, Rahim found not only a son but also a reason to rise each morning, a reason to fight through hardship, and most importantly, a reason to believe in love again. Yet, behind his joy, Rahim lived with a gnawing fear, the kind of fear that had carved itself into his soul the moment he first held the abandoned baby, that one day someone would come to claim the child, tearing apart the fragile happiness that had grown between them. He often whispered to the stars, "Please don't leave me again," as though the universe itself could be persuaded not to steal this gift from him. As Samir grew older, his questions began to bloom like wildflowers. "Baba," he asked one evening as they sat under the willow tree, "where is my mother?" The question pierced Rahim's heart like a blade, for he had no answers. He had only stories of Amina, the love of his life, but she was not Samir's mother. He had only silence when it came to the truth of the boy's origin, and silence was not something he wished to hand down to a child who deserved the world. So Rahim told him of Amina instead, painting her memory in bright colors, her kindness, her laughter, the way she believed love never truly dies. He hoped that in those stories Samir would find enough love to feel whole, but as the years went on, the boy's longing for truth only deepened. Rahim prayed every day that fate would remain merciful, that no one from the shadows of the past would step forward to claim what he had come to call his own. But fate, as always, listens to no man.